Okay, such an honor to be here with the Simon Compton. I know that you are the journalist and you write around a lot about the classic menswear. You're studying the feminine style, and I've been a big fan. But I heard that you are starting like 18 years already, right?
Yeah, that's right. 18 years this year. Yeah.
I think a lot of like people watching right now knows a lot about the Simon Compton, but there's some part that I really want to ask.
Sure.
You're often talking about the endurance of value qualities. Is there any clothing that you are like keep it for a long time and still wearing it right now to this day?
I think I do. I think it's probably shoes or bags. I think I found that like tailoring is fantastic, and tailoring can be, particularly bespoke tailoring, can be altered more than like any other type of clothing. But your body's always going to change. You know, and over 18 years, my body's changed up and down in weight and so on. So I can't wear everything that I used to wear like 18 years ago.
Right.
But other like leather goods like shoes or bags, certainly. The pair of like shoes that comes to mind is I have a pair of monk front shoes from Edward Green. There's a model that used to be called the Oundle on the 888 Last, which they don't sell anymore. But it was my first entry into really good like English made shoes because I couldn't afford Edward Green at full price. But Edward Green at that point made the shoes for Ralph Lauren Purple Label, which you could tell because the models were exactly the same and the styles were exactly the same. And so that went on sale, and at one point I think I got them off 60 or 70% off or something. And that was the first pair of good Northampton made shoes that I had. And I think I've had them resold 3 times in those years. I've written about it on the website in a column we have called How Great Things Age, and talking about them. And I showed them being like resold in Northampton, the whole sole being like ripped off the shoe, and like how like that gave me palpitations seeing this precious thing of mine done like that. I still have those today, and I still wear them sometimes. And leather is amazing for that kind of aging because it really shows its character after that time.
Okay.
It shows how you as a person polish them. It shows like the kind of wear you're going to put into them. There will be like a little salt stain you had at one point from really heavy rain, which you've over time slowly worn down and gone away, and it's still just about there if you know what to look for, but you know, the wear since has kind of mostly got rid of it. So I think more than any other type of material, that really kind of shows its age and keeps that character.
You said a bit about the bag. Is there anything that you are like keep it to today?
I don't think there are any bags I still use now, but certainly there are bags I've had for many years and I use pretty much every day. So I have a tote bag from Frank Clegg in the US, which I use pretty much every day. And it's just a very simple, like big bucket bag in a really thick leather. But because I'm always carrying clothes or clothes samples back and forth, I need a big bag, and that's aged really, really nicely. And I've probably had it about 10 years at this point.
That's a long time for 10 years. Any bad advice that you think that you get from someone or read it from somewhere that you think you want to change that because you're not thinking it's not the bad advice at all?
We have a section on the website that we call the rules and how to break them, which I think is very good because when men are first starting to learn how to dress, they want sort of shortcuts that give them a lot of information very quickly, which is understandable. And those tend to be encapsulated in rules. The problem with them is that they exist for a very particular reason, but they become a bit too restrictive and people follow them a bit too like closely or religiously. Like an example would be like there's an American saying about not wearing white after Labor Day. I assume originates because white is something you wear more in the summer when it's sunny and you're more likely to have bright light, and that works well with white things. But there's no reason you can't wear like white jeans on like a crisp sunny winter's day. Just like you got to realize the reason the rule existed in the first place and then apply that knowledge, not apply just the rule itself. Like we were talking earlier about wearing black. The reason that people don't wear black in classic menswear as clothing is that it's not as rich and doesn't look as luxurious and as elegant generally as black, but that doesn't mean that black doesn't have a place. It's a different look. But just if you realize why that rule exists in the first place, then you start to understand how you can break it and do something more interesting with it as well.
Like right now, you're breaking the rules of the no brown in town, right?
Yeah, exactly. Another good example.
All brown.
Yeah.
Which is good though. You have working with lots of tailoring and artisan for a long time. Any advice that you are keep in mind from all of them, like the best one, couple of the best?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think although tailors often will give you some good advice, I think people often mistake a lot of tailors, or at least artisans, for thinking of them as brands. and the culture these days is that a brand tells you what to do and tells you how to dress. Whereas really, historically, the role of the tailor was that the tailor works in conjunction with a very educated, stylish customer, and between the two of them, they come up with the clothing that suits the customer the best. So I think there's a balance there to be struck, but I think a lot of the time you should go with your own sense of style and your own ideas and have conversation with a tailor about these kind of things. And they're only likely to kind of push back when they feel the clothing you're talking about isn't really something that they can make in a very effective way, because it's just not their style. They're not going to have the confidence to make it in a very good way. So I think that kind of advice on their style is often useful from a tailor, but I wouldn't focus too much on style advice outside of that.
Any advice right now to the viewer?
About working with a tailor?
Yeah, about working with tailors.
I think working with a tailor is the most rewarding when it becomes a relationship, and that takes quite a long time and obviously quite a lot of money as well. But I think it's often the mistake young guys make is feel that they want to try every single style, and a new style or a new tailor becomes interesting, or people start talking about it, I must try that. In all the time I've been doing this, I don't think any tailor that I've kind of worked with like that has kind of lived up to the hype quite the same way, because the differences between tailors are not that huge, but people get excited by when someone has a slightly different cut or a slightly different style. I'd encourage readers to try as few tailors as possible. You know, if you have no idea about what might work for you, then maybe you want to try something very structured in English and something very soft and Neapolitan, for example. But don't feel you have to try all of them and try and kind of pick apart what the differences are between them, because I think you waste a lot of time and money that way.
So you're talking about the English style and Neapolitan style?
Yeah, I mean, those are sort of probably the extremes of the most structured and the softest, and there are lots of other kind of different types in between. Those are quite fundamentally different and will give a different look, but particularly guys who have a lot of money, like richer guys.
Not me.
But they often say I've tried 12 tailors, 15 tailors. It's well, that sounds like a waste of time. Why did you try so many tailors?
Right.
Because your bespoke really becomes an enjoyable thing when you've had 2 or 3 or 4 from the same person, and you've got to know each other, understand the style that really works for you. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So why are you saying that the Korean tailoring right now is getting more and more interesting, in your opinion?
I think the fundamental problem a lot of tailors have is that they don't have that much relevant style.
Okay.
And they're just not interested in it very much. Most tailors that I know on Savaro or in Paris or anywhere else are just not that into clothes generally. I think Korea was the first place I went to where almost everybody was much more into just style generally than other traditional tailors.
They dress well.
Yeah, and just interested. They weren't just, this is how you must wear things because this is the style that's created 100 years ago.
Right.
They're also interested in styles from the 80s, styles from the 60s, modern styles as well, and how that related to different fabrics, and looking at vintage clothing to see how those were kind of made and put together, like vintage tailoring as well. And I think it's only when someone has that kind of slightly more broad awareness that they can really trust them to kind of dress you in a way. From that point where I was talking about earlier about how tailors used to kind of work with intelligent and stylish customers to kind of develop a style. Often also you'd be at a bigger tailoring house, there would be a front of house person who was not a tailor, but they worked in the tailor shop because they loved clothes, and they were the stylish person. They were the person who was giving the customer advice. I mean, and the cutter was the craftsperson. They're there to execute something beautifully on your body, but they're not the kind of person that's actually poring over old issues of apparel arts and looking at different styles or whatever. That's more the kind of the front of house, and I think that's often something which is lacking now that a lot of the tailors are a lot smaller than they used to be.
If you can start all over again, for the whole wardrobe that you have, just start from the beginning, what would you buy? A couple of the first, maybe 2 or 3 things that you can give us.
Yeah, I guess it would go back to talking about those different styles in the English and Neapolitan. I would say the tailoring I still wear most is quite soft tailoring because I like to wear it with jeans and very kind of casual things. So I'd probably get some kind of dark tweed jacket from a Neapolitan tailor like Ciardi, for example, and then I would probably work with a smarter tailor, which might be an English tailor, it might be Milanese or Parisian. And one of my favorites is Ferdinando Caraceni, which is unfortunately closed last year, but I would work with maybe the Caraceni or with an English tailor like maybe Stephen Hitchcock to have a very kind of classic, more formal suit. So start with a grey flannel suit or a navy worsted, something like that. So I had something slightly smarter. And then, I don't know, maybe an overcoat next, something along those lines.
You have been travel a lot for around the world, I would say. Which is the day that you love the most? Any place in particular?
I'd say probably Tokyo.
Oh, everybody loves Tokyo.
I think particularly if you're a Westerner, I think Tokyo is the city that feels like it has the most distinct urban culture compared to other places in the West. You know, if you come from London, then Paris is great. Paris is a walking city, and it has this centre that has an amazing consistency in its age because it was all like destroyed and kind of rebuilt. And you love New York because New York has got such like amazing energy, and everybody's going out all the time and wearing crazy shit. And you know, it's a fantastic place to kind of visit. If you go to Tokyo, it feels like a recognisable urban centre, but still feels very, very different and alien. You know, and particularly like 10 years ago when I first went, I think it was more that because there was less English spoken. You couldn't like go on Google Maps and find out how to go places. Like you had to sort of try and understand the Japanese script to understand the street signs and this kind of thing. So that was absolutely fascinating. And I think it was also, again, obviously in the last like 20 years, we've had increasing growth of Japanese brands within menswear doing things in an incredible way.
Right.
Whether it's like bespoke shoes or it's things like denim and workwear. That's one place in the world where you'd go and probably find
Almost
men's
everything.
clothing like that, and find everything, and you wouldn't find it elsewhere.
You've been wearing suits and jackets for like many colors, from the purple, from Liverano, I believe.
Yeah.
Right now, we're talking about the personal colors. That you ever heard about the trends right now? What do you think about that?
You mean personal colours that are meant to suit your skin and your complexion
Right,
more, that
something
kind of thing?
like that.
I wrote an article about this a few years ago I think it's called Skin Complexion and Should You Care? I find it's a very interesting one. It's actually something one of my aunts used to do this, like analyze people's colours, and I had it done years
Your
ago.
warm tone or cool tone, something like that?
Yeah, exactly. Personally, I think it's a little bit overrated in terms of menswear. And I think the reason is, there's a few reasons. I think men generally wear less strong colour. They tend to wear more muted colours. You're more likely to wear like navy or like denim blue rather than like a very strong like ultramarine or really strong sky blue, right? Also, men don't really wear big blocks of colour in the same way. You know, a woman might wear a single colour for an entire dress or a very big top and nothing else, whereas men are usually wearing far more colours together. So the impact of colour is far less. And so like I think a guy might feel that he's kind of, I get washed out by like a pale yellow sweater. Okay, but you could wear that yellow sweater with like a white shirt underneath and it will look completely different on you. And you can wear that, you know, yellow sweater with denim jacket over the top, and again the denim would soften the yellow quite a lot. So telling a guy that they shouldn't wear like a bright yellow, for example,
Right.
seems a little bit misleading when it could be worn in so many different ways and so many things could soften that effect. I'd say it's more like the thing we were talking about before with the rules and whether you should care. It's like, okay, this is useful. Maybe a bright yellow suits you less than a pale yellow, but that doesn't mean you can't wear it. It just means if you do wear it, you've got to be quite conscious of what you wear it with to try and soften this effect that you know it has.
What is like your favorite accent of the colors that you love to wear, like besides the muted colors? Orange maybe?
I guess among classic menswear colours and materials, it's probably like a snuff suede, that kind of like orangey colour. You know, a bit like your glasses, that kind of like bright tan, because it is quite an unusual colour and quite strong, but still feels classic enough.
Like the Alden Aloysius that you
Yeah,
rate
exactly.
as well.
Yeah, exactly. Those kind of shoes. Yeah, and it's not an easy one to work into quite classic outfits, but I think it can be really satisfying when you do.
If you're closing your permanent style, it's not gonna happen anyway, but if you close it, what will you do for a living after that?
I mean, I think I'd probably want to stay doing journalism in some way and
Okay.
writing because I enjoy that so much. But I do think you can apply the skills of journalism to almost any field
Okay.
without necessarily that much knowledge of the field. Like at one point in my career, I ran legal magazines and people would always ask, well, so you employ lawyers to work on your magazine? And I say, well, no, because lawyers are terrible writers. And
Right.
it's much easier to teach a journalist about an area, a special area like the law, than it is to teach a lawyer how to write. Because if you're a good journalist, then you're never afraid to ask stupid questions, to say, I don't understand, get it explained to you until you do understand. Carry on asking questions, and then when you interview the second person, you already know the basics, then you ask more advanced questions. And when you interview the third person, you know everything to ask, and you're almost like an expert at that point. Whereas most other professions, like being a lawyer, doesn't really work in that way. It's assumed you know everything. If you're a good journalist, I think you can write about anything. Like I could go out and if I had enough time and interview the right people, I could write about fly fishing or about carpets or whatever else.
Today you all been running around Bangkok and you experience like the hot weather like us.
Yeah.
Any piece of advice if some guy like me want to buy something? Any material that we should looking for when you're buying things?
I think linen is the classic one for a reason. I think you can wear really nicely tailored linen trousers in still a fairly heavy weight
Right.
and still be kind of cool. The reason is that you don't actually get heat up that much through your legs, much more through your
Your
torso and then things like points like your wrists and your ankles. So if you wear a very loose like shirt and then like tailored in trousers, no socks and like a loafer or something else, you can still actually stay very, very cool, you know, and I've traveled and dressed like that in 40 degrees in Naples and those kind of places, and and that still works very well. And then with other clothes, often what's very important is having enough room for air to move around and kind of flow. So again, I'd say if you can have a linen trouser, it's more important to make sure you have enough room in the trouser. That matters more than the weight of the linen. On top, if you have like a shirt or jacket or whatever, which is kind of quite loose and untucked as well.
Like,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, that works very well as well.
Yeah, the overshirt with the permanent style is right now. It's on sale at the Decorum right now. The next one is gonna be like, you know, like the classic menswear and the casual wears right now is like dominant in most of the area, like the luxuries one. Any piece of the casual one that you are aiming for years and you never pulled the trigger?
I think there's quite a male thinking with wanting a really good leather jacket. I think everyone probably has some kind of idea in their head of a Marlon Brando or a James Dean or someone in a black leather jacket or something like that.
Right.
But it's a very hard thing to wear and not look like you're, you know, a 50-year-old trying to look 20 or, you know, you're like trying to look cool when it's not very you. I have one really nice vintage one that I love, but it's always been a bit too small for me, and these days it's even smaller, so I can't wear it, which is really annoying. So I'd like to find one that is really beaten up, and it doesn't have to be like vintage. It could be one that someone's just had for the last 5 years and really beaten up. But I recognize now that I don't have the lifestyle and the way I work. I'm never going to have a jacket like that and really wear it in the way that it should be worn. I'm never going to get to that stage, so I'm often looking for second-hand ones that somebody else has done all that hard work for me and then had to sell it on or something else so I can get that.
You're not gonna ride a Harley Davidson or something?
No. No.
Last questions, English food or Thai food? I got a lot of questions like this.
I like Thai food a lot, but I'm going to say English food because I think English food gets a very bad rap, you know?
Really?
Yeah. I think particularly, and we were surrounded by so many, in Europe anyway, surrounded by so many great food traditions in like France and Italy that I think people look down on English food a lot. But English food is great, you know, we're better at like things like pies and fish than most places. We do amazing desserts, and most places are terrible at desserts. Yeah, there's a lot of English like cooking that gets a lot underrated, so I'm going to stick up for that.
Come on, tell me one place that I have to go when I go to London next time. The casual one, or maybe whatever it is. I know that the morning breakfast is like the best in England.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, invented a good, breakfast.
I don't get the back pudding anyway, but yeah.
That's Scottish anyway. That's not English.
Okay. Any place that I can miss next time?
And there's a place called Fisher's in the city, as a fish restaurant, which is really, really nice, I think, and very, very British. It's right in the middle of the banking area, the city of London.
Okay.
And so it's got a lot of that kind of atmosphere still of guys on very short lunch breaks, very powerful people and running in and out in kind of, or having important
suits
lunches
and everything.
And stuff. Yeah, which I think that's kind of nice.
Okay, I'll check it out next time. Thank you so much, Simon.
Pleasure, man.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you ประมาณนี้ครับก็เดี๋ยวพบกันในคลิปหน้าใครยังไม่กด Subscribe ฝากกด Subscribe ด้วยนะครับแค่นี้ก่อนพบกันใหม่คลิปหน้าครับสวัสดีครับ Yeah, that's a first.
I'm not really much of a food person as well. I think I'd struggle. You know,
But you
most of the
love
time.
English food more than Thai food.
I mean, like nice fine English food is beautiful. Like a nice rose on Sunday.
Okay, but not fish and chip, right?
Yeah, I think fish and chips is fantastic. It's a very simple thing. I think you can't really.
But I don't get the vinegar on top of the fried thing. It's like soften it.
Put on vinegar, which is too cheap and too much, you know, and it's just like a very light, subtle thing is really nice. But the problem is with fish and chips generally it's just quite a cheap thing, you know. But it's a bit like tempura.
Tempura.
You can do fish and fish and chips in a very light batter. It's really nice, and there's very subtle flavors. But most of the time, it's just done it's a very like cheap workman's kind of food. So often it's done in a quite cheap way.
That's the first, because when I went to UK last time, the immigration asked me why you come here. The food in Bangkok is so good. Why you come here? Thank you.